Good morning, everyone. Compliments of the season, and thank you for joining us on the program. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. As we approach the end of 2024, we continue to explore the main events and issues that shaped the outgoing year. And what a year it's been for Nigeria, marked by significant economic challenges, controversies, and legislative milestones. The Senate no doubt played a crucial role in shaping the country's trajectory, from addressing the fallout of fuel subsidy removal to navigating the complexities of tax reform bills. The Senate has been at the forefront of efforts to mitigate these effects, which we've seen various committees working to ensure the executive is accountable for its policies. However, controversies have also surrounded its body language and how much it did for the vulnerable segments of the population. Recall that Senator Ali Ndume has been quite vocal in his criticism of the 10th Senate, particularly after his removal as chief whip. He described the sack as unfair and maintained that his actions criticizing the president didn't warrant such a decision. Ndume's removal was swift, with Senator Mohammed Monguno replacing him immediately. As we reflect on the past year or the outgoing year, it's clear that the Senate has faced numerous challenges in its role as check on the executive. There's the allegation of rubber stamp. You heard the Senate president addressing that earlier on. Senate have also raised questions about, quite a number of critics have raised questions about the institution's independence and effectiveness. Joining me today to provide some insights into Senate's role in shaping Nigeria's future, especially what it's been able to achieve in the outgoing year, and also bringing some clarity to the controversies, is Ken Okologo, who is consultant on communication and strategy to the president of the Senate. Mr. Okologo, thank you for joining us on the program, and compliments of the season to you.
Compliments of the season, and thank you for having me.
I want us to begin with one story that's everywhere right now. It has to do with the huge allegation coming from our neighbors in Niger. I'm sure you're following federal government's reaction, dismissing allegations made in a viral video in that regard, saying that the Niger General Chiani's allegations aren't only unfounded, but a dangerous attempt to divert attention from his administration's shortcomings. You recall that prior to this time, there have also been allegations that there are French military bases in Nigeria. At the center of this one is the Niger junta saying that we are accommodating the new terrorist group to destabilize this country. What do you make of this development?
I think the Minister of Information has spoken very clearly on this. I believe, in my view, or in my opinion, the visit of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to France did not go down well with the Sahel region, especially having seen France has become a hostile country in their perspective of the Sahel region. And so they were not happy with the visit of the president to the Sahel region. Well, I think I see it as a subtle blackmail to try to turn the hands of the relationship that have been developed between the federal government and the French government. And it is quite obvious that the Minister of Information, who is the proper person to speak on this, has clearly debunked it and has said that there was no way we could have had such a base, and it was in secret. I remember in the time of Jonathan, when we had mercenaries fighting Boko Haram, it wasn't hidden. Some of those mercenary soldiers were shown. And there have not been any evidence so far to show that there are foreign troops on Nigerian soil. So it's more on the realm of the accusation that is being made by Niger.
Absolutely. But beyond the allegations and counter allegations, some have said Niger is our neighbor, and your neighbor is closer to you than even your brother or your international investor or investment partner. How do you think Nigeria can cautiously and diplomatically resolve this, what seemed a disagreement between both nations?
Just like you have said, there's no way you can do without Niger, or Niger cannot do it without Nigeria. Niger needs Nigeria more than we need Niger. And so you must have a friendly relationship with your neighbors, especially with the war on insurgents, terrorists, and Boko Haram, and Lakarua, the latest one that has come on board. So there must be a signage, especially with our defense forces, because some of these bandits do cross-border, carry out cross-border activities. And so he knows fully well that he needs Nigeria, who is more of a bigger brother, and have more troops and have more military might to be able to deal with these insurgents. I don't think anybody can accuse Nigeria of harboring terrorists when we are fighting terrorists and the insurgents. We need peace and security. That's one of the things that has been a minus to some of the administrations before now. And the president has admitted that even though there is a huge gain, it's not yet Uhuru. We are still grappling with a lot of insecurity, especially in the northeast. So Niger, sharing borders with us, know fully well that they need this cooperation with the defense ministry to be able to achieve a total wipeout of the insurgents who are terrorizing the region, especially the Sahel region too.
I mean, the same Lakarua terrorists that we are now being accused of sponsoring. There was an airstrike in Sokoto recently that even involved the death of civilians. So it's really funny, the kind of allegations coming from Niger. But let's get our attention back to the Senate. I understand that you are consultant on communication and strategy to the president of the Senate. How do you think, because when you consider what has happened this year and the kind of feedback Nigerians are giving relative to inflation, the cost of living, their standard of living and what have you, how do you think the Senate in the outgoing year has ensured the executive is accountable for its policies in the way it affects economic crisis and rising inflation?
Well, it's very clear that Nigerians are feeling the pains of inflation. Inflation is at about 34%, and unemployment is still very high. So there is no doubt that there is a whole lot of hunger in the land, which even the government acknowledges. And if you notice, this year was when the Senate was able to ensure that they passed the budget of the minimum wage, which took 35,000 naira to 70,000 naira. And they also passed the supplementary budget to accommodate that increment. If you also notice, the Senate is not unmindful of the pains that Nigerians are going through. They have been able to get development commissions, which has not been in place before now. We have the Southwest, the South, the Southeast, the Northwest, and the North Central, which have been passed into law. The North Central and the South has not been assented to, but provisions have even been made in this year's budget for these development commissions. Why are these development commissions necessary? They need to bring government nearer to the people. Because when you bring government nearer to the people, you're able to touch the grassroots. It is the grassroots that is feeling the pinch, not the bourgeois or the bureaucrats who live in Abuja and reside in Lagos, the private sector people who are not feeling the pinch of this inflation and feeling the pinch of this increase in the price of goods and services. So the Senate has also been able to do that. And the Senate has also been able to take charge of so many, over 150 resolutions have been passed, and 25 legislations have also been passed in the 1 year of this life of the Senate. The bottom line of it is that, you know, one thing is to pass a law, one thing is also get it quickly assented. And, you know, it takes a whole lot of process. It has to go through the first reading, the second reading, the third reading. Some of these are committed into sent into the committees for them to do a proper vetting and have public opinions on them before they refer them back to the Senate. But in all, you must agree that even with the probe that was done for the ways and means, which also helped in eliminating these ways and means that was making the government committed to 90 or 98%, almost 98% of debt servicing, reducing it to almost 60%. The Senate has also played a significant role in that. And also probing the petroleum sector, which today we know is still fraught with a lot of issues that have made it impossible for us a better pricing for the pump price of petrol, which has a direct effect on the prices of goods and commodities. And so in all, you can look at the Senate and realize that, look, this Senate, the 10th Senate, has achieved a whole lot in its first 1.5 years or so than any other Senate before it. I mean, I can't a summary of what it is, because the Senate spokesman, I'm sure, will eventually have a press conference at the end of the year to reel out all the achievements that have been made by the Senate.
I'm hoping that we can scratch the surface of the balance between the Senate's oversight role and the need to support the executive in implementing its policies. For instance, how do you respond to allegations that the 10th Senate has become a rubber stamp to this executive? As far back as last year, Senator Ndume raised the issue of hastily passing some bills into law without adequate consideration. Mr. Okulubu, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Sorry, can I get that question again?
Oh, I was asking about the balance between oversight function and also helping the executive implement some of its policies. I made reference to allegations from Senator Ali Ndume as far back as 2023, claiming that some bills were being hastily passed without due consideration. How do you react, as someone who has also become an insider, the allegations of this Senate being a rubber stamp to the executive?
When there is a synergy between the Senate and the executive, there is always this impression that the Senate is a rubber stamp. And Nigerians before now have always viewed the National Assembly as one that is more like insensitive in terms of their budget and all that. But you need to be an insider, or need to follow the services of both the Senate and the House of Rep for you to understand that most of these accusations are not exactly how it is. But the impression they have is when the Senate President is at peace with the President, when the House Speaker is at peace with the President, then that means it's a rubber stamp. It is not always the case. There must be a synergy for you to get things to work. Why it has been easy for things to work between the government of the Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the National Assembly is because of the understanding they have. It's not like that they don't disagree. Of course they do disagree, but they don't have to come to the public to bring out their disagreement for them to achieve their purpose. These things are discussed behind the scene and they are agreed on. And so by the time they come, you'll see some dissent, because definitely all senators cannot be on the same page. There are some senators who feel very strongly about certain issues, and you would also expect and respect their opinion. But the important thing is the majority carries the day, and that's why everything is put to voice vote. And when it's put to voice vote and the majority says yes, the Senate President will say the ayes have it. You can see how the Julius Berger MD, a warrant of arrest has been issued against the MD of the biggest company that is doing business in Nigeria, just to show that there are no sacred cows. You can see how the President of the Senate complained bitterly about ministers who have tried to disrespect the Senate and how they'll be called to order. And don't forget that the Senate and the House of Reps, they have the power to seize the purse. And definitely the budget 2025 is going to be looked at along that line. You must be able to also show that you have achieved this much in your ministry. They're not going to rely on the special advisor on policy to the President to do all that. It is going to be legislative work that is going to be done by members of the both chambers. It's a bicameral house, you must also agree. And so there must also be a synergy between the House of Rep and the Senate for them to be able to pass the bills and pass the laws that they will concord to before it is signed by the President.
Indeed. And a lot have been said in the course of the year, specifically about the nature of the relationship between the Senate and the executive and how that relationship impacts on legislative process. Precisely, are you saying that there is no iota of truth in the concern that the Senate's independence might have been compromised by its relationship with this current administration?
You've not been able to give me, if you were able to give me an example of any bill that was passed that actually gave credence to that assertion, I would agree with it. If you look at this Senate, you will agree that if you go on YouTube, you're able to watch the live proceedings. every session of the Senate is beamed live. The only sessions you don't see are the few times they go into executive sessions. So it's impossible for Nigerians who follow on YouTube. Maybe a lot of people are not able to follow on YouTube, but this is to tell them that there is a YouTube channel that beams all the activities of the Senate and the House of Rep live. And if you look at it, you will understand that there is always a debate. There is always, for example, the issue of demolitions in Abuja. People tried to say the state president was trying to sweep it under the carpet. But they saw what happened on that day, that it was not on the other paper. But they broke the rules to say that, look, this was a matter of urgent national importance, which usually they might not take up to 2, 3, or 4 in a week. But they took it because of the importance of it, and they actually summoned the Minister of the FCT and ordered that all the demolitions must stop, except the ones that were ordered by the courts. Nigerians did not see that. So it's just when you agree on certain things with the executive, they tend to say that, oh no, this Senate is compromised. But I can assure you that the Senate president has a beautiful relationship with the president. It does not hinder him looking at the sufferings of Nigerians. He called out the Transition Company of Nigeria. He called out the discos. He said that the government of Tinubu would come to naught. Those were his words. If nothing is done about the power situation, the national grid has collapsed a couple of times. And he clearly said that they were going to take a decision because they have the power to even revoke the sale of this national assets if we continue to have epileptic supply of electricity and Nigerians will keep paying for band A without having the services. So all these things are things that he has done and shows clearly that he's on the side of the masses when it becomes necessary. But you don't just go having a conflict with the executive just to prove that you're not a rubber stamp. I can assure you that that assertion is not true at all.
All right. So the Senate president has courted several controversies this year. And I just want to tell you a few of them and then get your reaction on them as well. A national daily was quoted to have said he is known for often making absurd remarks over serious national issues. One of it is, let's be eating while Nigerians protest. I'm sure you followed that story. He sparked outrage when he made this comment about the nationwide protests over economic hardship. And it raised the questions about his sensitivity to the plight of ordinary Nigerians. He also had mentioned that the Senate chamber was not a nightclub, addressing Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan that she needed to be recognized before speaking during plenary, comparing the Senate chamber to a nightclub. That comment has been criticized as derogatory. At another point, he mentioned "let the poor breathe," his comment during a debate on electricity tariff hikes, which was labeled as mocking the struggles of low-income Nigerians. There are quite a number of others. I'm just reading out some of the reactions online in the course of the year. There's the return to old national anthem. His support to that old national anthem, for some, was criticized as a major distraction from more pressing national issues. How really do you respond to criticisms that the Senate president is out of touch with the struggles of ordinary Nigerians based on some of his utterances in the outgoing year?
But Nifemi, if you had followed what happened, you would have agreed with me that a lot of these mediums that said those things retracted. For example, when they said during the riots, that's said by all the people that said it. That said he said he'll be eating while others will be protesting. That was completely false. Every medium that said it retracted it and published what was right. You know what happens is that the Senate president is often quoted out of context because they notice that Akpabio, his name trends. So people just try to munch videos out of context. What he said was, I was with him in Port Harcourt. Interestingly, we traveled to Port Harcourt to flag up the empowerment of over 10,000 Niger Delta youths who are today receiving money every end of the month. And so it was the peak of when they were to have the riots. And he said, look, it was the right of every Nigerian to riot. But what they were saying was that they did not want a situation where hoodlums would hijack it. And that the Niger Delta Development Commission managing director had said that, oh, for them in the Niger Delta, they want to marry the government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. They'd rather be home eating while others will be protesting because they know that it has never been this good for them. And so they quoted the Senate president I haven't said that. He never said anything like that. That has already been completely debunked by all the people that said it. And the one you said about Senator Natasha Akpoti, that was clarified on the floor of the Senate, that was not the intention. How would he have referred to the Senate as a nightclub? When you talk about a nightclub is a noisy place where people make noise. And the Senate is not a place where you make noise. And interestingly, do you know your sister station, AIT, had to ban a newspaper because of the Senate president? The newspaper actually had to speak to the chairman of the station because they quoted the Senate president during their newspaper review saying that anywhere you find food, you should avail yourself of it. Meanwhile, he was talking to his colleagues on the day he was inaugurated, and he was telling them, he was actually sharing it as a joke. And they munched it and let it trend on Twitter and gave the impression that he was the one that said it. In fact, a lot of the blogs, popular blogs, retracted their story. One of the very popular journalists from Channels Television did an independent investigation to prove that it was false. And this was between me and him. I asked him, I said, sir, why is it that your name is always like this? He said, look, this is the lot you have to pay when you live your anonymous life and decide to go to public service. He told me a story of when he was a governor in Akwa Ibom, how he would be on his way to work and he would see a newspaper saying that he had been invited by the EFCC and he had run to London. And that by the time he finished his tenure, all these newspaper people hosted him who were publishing negative things about him. And they actually confessed to him that they were feeding their children by the negative news that they were spreading about him, and that he was really shocked. So the thing about it is, it's for us to be able to read between the lines when you hear such comments. But you know, the social media age has made it very impossible for you to verify independently information that are passed. And you know, bad news travels faster than the good ones. Ifemi, I can assure you.
So I see you don't agree with some of the comments that his comments on national issues are flippant and dismissive. And I get the point, the fact that you're able to respond to each of those controversies. But that really is the point, because communication, as I understand it, isn't what you say, is what people hear. And when you occupy such strategic position, I personally would have thought that it will be something of concern that your message is driven out in such a way that it is not misinterpreted. For instance, just Google it. There are allegations that is more focused on promoting the party, for instance, rather than serving the needs of the Nigerian people. This kind of image and this kind of interpretation, which is not, and I'm not making it up, there are things out there, if you Google his name and find out the things that people have said about him. Is it a major concern for his communication team? Is it willing to adjust accordingly so that it doesn't distract from the good work you mentioned he's been doing?
Well, I just reeled out all the things that have been achieved under the 10th Senate, and as the chairman of the National Assembly and being the Senate president. See, Nifemi, if you want to bother yourself about what they have said or they have not said, this as a consultant on communication and strategy, I'm not just defending. I'm really now facts of news medias that have. You know, the worst thing that happens to a journalist is when a journalist comes back to retract a story and say, "I'm sorry." I'm sure you know that you're a journalist. And I'm telling you that 99% of all these mediums that have said these things have retracted them and have said they are sorry. So does that not show that they were not true? So what do you do about such a situation? I also told you a story of how people like to trend. You know, when you have a name people like to use, they use it to trend. And you know what they do? They earn money from Twitter, they earn money from YouTube, they earn money on their handles. And that has been the case. But you also agree with me that in a couple of months now, you haven't heard anything negative about the Senate president in that hemisphere.
All right. Let's move on to other issues. Earlier this month, we saw Mr. President present the 2025 budget to a joint session of the National Assembly. Of course, he jokingly mentioned that all of them are automatically re-elected to the 11th National Assembly. I think it was a good one, the way you recovered from that mistake. But what do you make of the budget cycle? We are already getting used to the January-December cycle. Do you think this document was submitted late? Because we're now into the holidays. Do you see a major disruption in that budget timing?
Yeah, I think the executive must take blame for that. It's not the National Assembly. The documents came late. First, you must bring the medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal strategy paper. It is from the medium-term expenditure framework, you know what the budget will be like, because it's a projection from 2025 to 2027. And it also takes into account what 2024 budget performance was like. And so by the time the medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal strategy paper came, remember what came was 47.5 trillion, and the exchange rate was 1,400. Then the benchmark was $75. But by the time he brought the budget at an exchange rate of 1,500, and the budget now went up to 47.9 trillion, even though the benchmark remained at $75. So you do not have to blame the National Assembly, because they are not magicians. You have to commit this budget to different committees who are going to scrutinize this budget and are going to understand to how 2024 budget performed before they can decide to pass it and refer it to the committee of the whole, and bring it before the Senate and bring it before the House of Reps. So the budget cycle certainly they will not be able to achieve that cycle. That is why you see that there was an extension to 2024 budget up to
let me hold you for a minute and open the phone lines. We'll get back to our conversation shortly. Mr. George has called in from Ikeja. Good morning.
Good morning, Nifemi, and compliments of the season to Mr. Kolubu. Nifemi, with due respect, those statements you read out from the internet, they are from a particular group of people, and they are supporters of a particular party. It will interest you to know that the party they support, their members in the National Assembly, about 80% of them that were elected into the National Assembly have become to the ruling party. That should tell you the seriousness or otherwise of those things that you are reading on the internet. As for Senator Dume, I think what he's saying is neither here nor there. He's known for making statements without thinking about it in the past. For example, look at the tax reform bills. He was the first to, express an outburst about it. And when he was talked to, he said he has not read it. How are you a senator with all the stuff you have, make a statement on a critical bill and that you have not seen? I read two days ago, I saw a tweet he made with a photograph or a video of people queuing up to receive Christmas presents in the president's personal house at Bodilon. And what he was saying, that it is a reflection of bad governance. The president has been doing that for 30 years. And I didn't expect a statement like that to come from Senator Dume, who himself is a product of voters who vote from the IDP camps. 2 times he has been elected to the Senate now, and the votes came from those that live by handouts in IDP camps. Those are where he comes from. Because of the Boko Haram war, he cannot go there. So the votes he receives are from those who are in IDP camps. That is where they vote for him. And those people he's talking about at Bodilon, if you check, some of them are from Gaza, who fled the Boko Haram war that came to Lagos. It's not only people from the Southwest. It's people from all over Nigeria that are residents in Lagos here. He always thinks before he makes statements. I expect a senator of the Federal Republic to research what he wants to say before it just comes to the public. And if you check, you will discover that this senator seems to be venting his personal disappointments of what he has failed to get in the Senate, and just begin to criticize without anything to back it up. That's just what I thought I should let you know. Those things you are saying on the internet, we know them. You can see how Ken has debunked it, that most of them come back to apologize behind the scene. Don't think.
All right, Mr. George, I think you made your point very clear. Mr. Okolobo, were you able to hear the caller?
No, I didn't hear what he said. What did he say?
Well, just corroborating quite a number of things you've said in defense of the Senate President. Let's take a short break and see if we can fix that. We'll be right back. Stay with us, everyone.
Every second, every minute, every hour, and every day, time doesn't just tick away. It counts down to political decisions that shape our world.
This country must move.
Imagine the impact these decisions have on our lives. Some are consequential, others may leave us intrigued or baffled.
You will have no better friend and partner than Nigeria.
Step in and feel the frenzy like never before. Join me every weekday for an hour of fact-finding interviews where questions cut to the core.
How would you say your administration has fared in these sectors?
I will dig in to get to the heart of issues, from local politics to global insight. Join me as I unearth the power plays, jaw-dropping revelations, and the unfiltered truth. This isn't just politics, it's unraveling the stories that matter. Brace yourself for Politics Tonight every weekday at 8 p.m., where every decision echoes along the corridors of our lives. Politics Tonight, only on TVC News.
Doubt and fear doesn't occur at the canvas, it shows in the canvas. It shows the conation of raw earthen material slabbed, stroked, and molded at a pace provided by the doubt and fear. Every move way in the struggle of one to the other, merging the past to the present, brushstrokes of colors seen but not known. For when the wailing stops, the pieces settle down in abject beauty, erected for a century of a century. Speaking, advocating, protesting as the arts are meant to be.
Experience information and entertainment like never before as TVC Breakfast takes your weekends to a whole new level. Introducing TVC Breakfast Weekend Edition, your ultimate source of thrilling sports updates, insightful political analysis, and captivating entertainment news. Stay in the know with what's trending, catch up with the latest in sports, and immerse yourself in the latest buzz from the world of music and movies. Your weekends are no longer just days off, but moments packed with knowledge, excitement, and enjoyment. TVC Breakfast Weekend Edition, only on TVC News.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did they say?
First, with breaking news.
Every weekday on Business Nigeria, we uncover the secrets of the financial world.
We analyze the stock market, shares, bonds, and the thrilling world of cryptocurrency.
Facts matter. Our team dives deep to separate fact from popular opinion.
We simplify complex government policies as it impacts your everyday life, helping you navigate the ever-changing financial landscape.
Watch Business Nigeria every weekday at 2 p.m. only on TVC News. First with breaking news.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching This Morning, and I'm joined by Sir Ken Okologo, who is consultant on communication and strategy to the President of the Senate. Thank you for staying the course on the program. You established earlier that with the late submission of the 2025 spending plan, we may be filling with the January to December budget cycle. Perhaps we'll raise that up subsequently with people within the executive. But we've seen some very ambitious metrics in this document, one of which is drastically reducing inflation rate from over 30% to 15% in the new year. Walk us through how you think the Senate plans to ensure that this budget is implemented effectively and that the executive is held accountable for its execution.
If you look at the budget, for example, 4.09 trillion was allocated to defense. Some of the senators have also even raised the fact that they believe 4.09 trillion might not be adequate enough. Like, could have gone maybe above 5 trillion. Now, without peace and security, you cannot have food production, especially in areas like Benue, Plateau, and others that are known to be the food basket of the country. And so if you have food production, you'll be able to deal with the issue of having food security and being able to export. Why do I say this? If you're able to export, you're going to earn the needed forex that is able to drive down the exchange rates, and you're able to shore up the GDP, and that is where you are going to be able to attack inflation. The only way you can attack inflation effectively is to bring more supplies and to move from consumption to production. And so when you have more farmers who are encouraged to go to the farm to farm, it becomes impossible for you not to have food surplus. For example, I'll tell you, my houseboy had been begging me. I was wondering why I should give him a soft loan. And I was asking what he needed the soft loan for. He said he needed to buy, he's from Benue, he said he needed to buy from, buy some farm products to keep till June. And that by the time it gets to June, the prices will become higher. And so I got a typical inflation impression of what it means like to hold this farm produce. And so you can imagine how many people actually do that when you give them such soft loan and they buy these products and keep it up until June when they can sell. And so this hoarding would stop if we have surplus. And if you look at education, education is 3.5 trillion. 3.5 trillion is a lot, but it's still, to some senators and some members of the House, it's still grossly inadequate, because when you have education, you are going to get this idle minds out of the streets, and you reduce the rate of crime. You look at health. Health is about 2.4 trillion. 2.4 trillion. We're talking about having primary health care in each of the federal constituencies that are enough to cater for even some of the local governments in those federal constituencies, not even senatorial districts now, or going to wards and local governments. So some might also say 2.4 trillion is not enough. But the 47.9 trillion is the biggest budget we have ever had in the history of this country. But Nifemi, you also agree with me that if you look at it in terms of the dollar, it's about $28.18 billion. And if you look at the 2024 budget, which was just about 28.5 or so trillion naira, it was about $36 billion. So there's an $8 billion differential. And you know, we are predicating this budget mainly on the mono products we sell. Since this is more of a mono economy, we're looking at crude going at $75. So there's also the chances that we might not be able to sell crude at $75 if Donald Trump goes into production, as he has said he's going to go into production. And if we're able to settle the crisis between Ukraine and Russia, and the crisis in the Middle East. So the possibility of leaving the benchmark at $75 is also something you must also look at that might affect the budget. You're also looking at the issue of 2 million barrels of crude oil, 2.06 barrels, which the budget is hoping will be producing every year. If we do not have peace and security in the oil producing areas, we will not be able to achieve 2 million barrels of crude oil every day. And so these are the factors that the National Assembly are going to take into place when they are going to work on this budget, so that they can come up with a realistic budget that will serve the people and drive this inflation from the 34%, over 34% where we are now, to the 15% that the president desires it to be, and which we desire it should be as Nigerians, because at this point in time, people are buying a bag of rice for over 100,000 or within 100,000 naira. How many people can afford it? How many people can afford the price of tomatoes, the price of meat and others? So this is the reality of the situation. And because once we don't take care of inflation and the exchange rate, the budget is going to be definitely affected.
The spending, absolutely.
The spending rate becomes affected. And when you don't put money in the pockets of the people, how do you reflect the economy?
The spending plan is quite ambitious. And I had the chairman House of Reps Committee on Defense on the program yesterday. We were talking about the fact that fighting insecurity continues to be a priority for us. And that's where most of the money goes into, over 4 trillion naira in 2025. What do you make of this development? Because he was saying perhaps it's not a Nigerian thing and that every other nation has to spend more on defense and fighting insecurity. I remember speaking with the governor of Kaduna State, who has introduced some level of non-kinetic effort to stopping kidnapping in Kaduna, which includes granting some form of amnesty to repentant criminals. According to him, that has yielded some results. Do you think it's about time we start thinking of alternative, or you consider it norm that the highest spending still goes to defense?
Well, I just said in my earlier answer that some people feel the 4.09 trillion is not even enough. It's unfortunate the situation we have found ourselves, where we are having a Nigerian Bureau of Statistics saying that over 2 trillion has been paid as ransom for kidnapping, which is more than what was even allocated to the police, if it's true, but that is coming from the NBS. It's a situation where the country has found, I mean, this administration inherited. Yes, we need to ensure security. If there is no security, no country can thrive. Even in the international arena, remember that Donald Trump said he would not protect any of the NATO countries that do not at least give 5% of their budget to NATO. That is defense. That is even not talking about the ones that they are going to commit to their internal security. And so there is never too much to have been voted for defense at this point in time, because we are facing a lot of crises in terms of security. Once we can get the security architecture of this country 100%, which okay, let's say even 85%, and we're able to stem Boko Haram and stem Lakaroa and stem all the other terrorist groups and bandits who are terrorizing the country, then we can talk of cutting the defense budget into half. But if we're not able to achieve that, then we have to vote more funds into defense, because without security, we cannot achieve peace, we cannot achieve production, and we're looking at leaving consumption to production to drive down the inflation, which is biting very hard on every Nigerian right now.
We had the Senate President speak briefly about misconceptions about budget padding and the importance of constituency project just before Mr. President presented this document to a joint session of the National Assembly. What would you say is the 10th Senate stance on the issue of budget padding? And do you think it will be prevented? The rumors we hear about it won't happen again in the coming year.
What you call budget padding is not padding in the actual sense. What people don't understand is that the budget is a law. And so what the president submitted was a proposal. The National Assembly has every right to tinker with it and to add or subtract where they deem fit. Are you with me?
Yes, I can hear you, please.
They might decide to say that this 49.7 trillion is inadequate and take it to about 52 trillion, for example. And by the time it comes, people will say, oh, they padded the budget with over 2 trillion. No. Each senatorial district, each federal constituency has its own peculiarities and has its own challenges. And some of, not only their immediate areas where they represent, some of the ministries might have been inadequately funded, and they look at it and say, no, we must add some more funds to this department, this road, this school that is being built, this hospital, this university. And so by the time all that is done and the budget comes out, people refer to it as padding. It's not padding, it's the legitimate right of the assembly to tinker with the budget and come out with a workable document, just like I explained earlier. And it's a law. And when they pass it, it becomes a law.
We'll talk about who plays the oversight function on these peculiar spendings, especially as it relates to constituency projects shortly. But Reverend Dominic is on the line. Good morning, Reverend. Good morning, Reverend. Please go ahead with your contribution.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Please, if you can hear me, give me a signal. I can't hear you.
Well, I can hear you.
Femi, if you can hear me, give me a signal.
I can hear you. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me, Femi?
I can hear you, Reverend. Go ahead with your contribution.
I can't hear you totally, but let me make my cause. Okay.
All right, we'll probably get back to that conversation subsequently. Mr. Ken, quickly, you know, the concerns of Nigerians really has to do with accountability. Nobody faults monies, budgeted for developmental purposes. But do you think we've been able to provide adequate transparency when these monies are dispatched?
That's why you see that the Senate is very bothered about those ministries and those departments that are not responding when they are summoned, and they're taking a very strong position on it. I think with the arrest warrant that has been issued on the MD of Julius Vega, it will serve as a deterrent to anybody that has been summoned again to come and give account of what you have done. I think also the corruption agencies has to be strengthened more. The FCC has done a very good job of nipping it in the bud. A lot of this, because corruption to me is not going to catch people who have stolen money or who have committed the crime. When you can also nip it in the bud, it helps a whole lot in the fight against corruption. And so the National Assembly is going to, I'm sure, also fund the anti-corruption agencies a lot so that they can increase their fight against corruption. And these oversight functions will not be successful if the corruption agencies do not also nip some of these things in the bud and expose it also to the National Assembly. So they will have to work hand in hand in that aspect.
I recall the Senate President observing concerning behaviors from some ministers and heads of extra ministerial departments who, according to him, sometimes neglect their duty to promptly submit to legislative oversight and even sometimes disregarding invitations from relevant committees of the legislature. We'll probably watch out to see how that goes in the new year, especially when it comes to breaching the Constitution in that regard. But we are rounding off now. I want us to touch on perhaps one of the most controversial bills of the outgoing year, the tax reforms bill. What status it is now currently before the Senate, and are you optimistic that they will be able to gain some consensus amidst the dividing voices that have trailed these bills?
The tax reform bill has been committed to the Senate Committee on Finance, led by Senator Sani Musa. I remember they were given 6 weeks to do public hearings, but we must also not forget that the House of Rep must concur with the Senate. It's a bicameral house. And so the Senate is also not mindful of the fact that the House of Rep have not gotten to that stage where it has been committed to the Committee of Finance in the House of Rep. So there's an understanding that they must work hand in hand to be able to reach that goal. If you look at the tax reform, we cannot deny the fact that that bill would eventually come to stay, because we are looking at where people who pay under ₦1 million or ₦1 million will not pay taxes. We're looking at people who pay 50 million, who earn 50 million naira or under 50 million naira will not pay taxes. We're looking at a situation whereby VAT 60% derivation is now gotten. I'm able to make a call in Kaduna, I'm able to make a call in Sokoto or my village, Ubiaruku, and the VAT goes to that area and not where the headquarters of the communication company is. There are so many positives about the tax bill. Yes, there might be negatives like the inheritance aspect of it, the tax paid and all that, which some people have pointed out. And the concerns about people like Senator Alim Dube, respected senators who have kicked against it. But all that will be done during the public hearing. If the public hearing, majority of the opinion is that the tax bill should go, the Senate Committee on Finance will come back and report back to the Committee of the Whole, and it will be considered. But in my own opinion, personal opinion, I think the president has done well with the tax bill. Every Nigerian should be communicated, especially National Orientation Agency has a lot to do in these regards. They need to send the message across of what the tax bill really is, because most people don't know what it is. They're being misinformed.
And I hope that we're also not overestimating the public hearing, because you have highlighted some of the most controversial components of the bill, the inheritance, the derivation issue around the value-added tax. The governors came up earlier to say, you know what, why not take a break and consult more widely. There were conversations as to do the stakeholders, including the northern governors and some of the senators from the north, really do have an in-depth understanding of this document. Do you think that is an avenue that the executive could have explored before bringing it before the National Assembly?
I don't think there can be anything more encompassing than the public hearing. The public hearing, that means you are bringing it before the whole Nigerians, and that is a committee of the whole. The governors derive their powers from the vote of the people, and so you are taking it back to the people. So what I think the governors should do is to allow the public hearing to take place in each of the zones, and the consent of each of the zones will be brought before those public hearing. The important thing is that the public hearing, I know, will be transparent. What they might want to say is that it might not be transparent. I know it will be transparent, and it will give you room to vent all your concerns about the tax bill. But in my own personal view, not in the view of the Senate President, I've looked at that tax bill, and I think what the President of this country has done is for us to be able to generate revenues. Okay, look at Abuja, for example, where we all live. I'm in Lagos now because of the Christmas break. Abuja has turned into something else. And you hear the FCT minister clearly saying that it gets only 1% of the federal allocation, that Abuja will never have been what it is like if it's not collecting ground rents. He doesn't have oil in Abuja. All he does is to make sure he gets his taxes. And that everything we are seeing is that he's achieving now is basically coming from taxes. Nigerians don't pay taxes, and we all know it. We're all guilty of it. I hardly have anybody that you might want to absolve. And so by the time people start paying their bills and paying these taxes, and this tax reform bill is not geared towards the poor, it's geared towards the rich. And it's a way of increasing if, for example, from what Oyedele said, we can generate up to 43, 48 trillion naira from this bill, why are we going to be so bothered about a mono economy that is dependent on only oil? We have the ombudsman, we have the tax appeal, we now also have the tax committee, and so to be able to address and harmonize the taxes we pay so that we don't also pay multiple taxes. So I think what behaves on the executive is to ensure that the National Orientation Agency does its work by sending it across the 774 local governments, sending a strong message of what the tax bill actually is, even before the public hearing begins.
All right. Mr. President, during his media chat, mentioned is open to negotiation and concessions to address the controversies. We're counting on that and seeing how it will all pan out in the new year. A big thank you, Sir Ken Okolobo, consultant on communication and strategy to the President of the Senate. Thank you for talking to us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And that's our show, everyone. See you again soon.